First off, I would like to welcome Representative Hsu. Welcome to Fed State. First up, are there any bill requests? Representative Hoy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. I have 26 RS 3176, an act removing a current exception to the criminal use of weapons statute that allows any individual over the age of 21 or with a provisional license to possess a concealed handgun in or on school property or grounds or any regularly scheduled school sponsor activity or event.
Committee, are there any questions? Seeing none and without objection, bill accepted.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Are there any other bill requests? Seeing none, I'm going to open up the hearing on HB 2687. And to get us started, Kyle will bring us up to speed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. House Bill 2687 would prohibit any governmental agency that owns, controls, or has jurisdiction over waters of the state from prohibiting the takeoff, landing, or operation of an aquatic aircraft, or regulate or require a permit or fee for the operation of an aquatic aircraft. These prohibitions would only apply in areas where boats or vessels are permitted. I'll go through the definitions quickly. Governmental agency would be defined to mean any officer, department, bureau, division, board, authority, agency, commission, or institution of the federal government, state government, or any political subdivision of the state. Waters of the state would be defined to mean any waters within the territorial limits of the state. Aquatic aircraft would mean any motorized aircraft, seaplane, float plane, or similar aircraft that is capable of taking off or landing on water. And again, vessel is defined to mean any watercraft that's designed to be propelled by machinery, oars, paddles, or wind action upon a sail for navigation on water. Under current regulations, KAR 115.8-13, which is a regulation under the Department of Wildlife and Parks, it states that motorized aircraft landings and takeoffs shall be allowed in designated areas only or as authorized by the Secretary. Additionally, KSA 3-701 gives political subdivisions of the state the authority to administer airport zoning regulations. Airport is defined in those statutes to mean any area of land or water designed and set aside for the landing or taking off of aircraft. But outside of the state, the federal government has exclusive sovereignty of airspace of the United States, and the administrator of the FAA has expressed statutory authority to prescribe air traffic regulations to prevent collisions between aircraft and water vehicles. Additionally, waters that are managed by the Army Corps of Engineers are subject to additional regulations. The operation of aircraft on project lands at locations other than those designated by the district commander is prohibited. And I still need to submit my briefs to the committee assistant, but I've included some footnotes that reference those federal and state statutes. With that, I'd be happy to take any preliminary questions.
Committee, any questions? Seeing none, thank you, Kyle. I'm going to open up the oral proponent side of this, and first up is Representative Roser. Welcome to committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for having me. Chairman Kessler, Vice Chair Schmoy, and Ranking Minority Meyer, and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to submit testimony as a proponent of HB 2687. My name is Angel Roser. I represent 67, District 67, which is located in the west part of Manhattan. I'm also a student pilot working on my private pilot certificate. Currently, seaplanes, also known as float planes, are effectively prohibited from taking off, landing, and operating on Kansas water. It is due to a patchwork of unclear statutes right now, and in preliminary conversations, we are finding that there was a lot of gray area regarding these seaplanes. While there is no explicit statewide ban on seaplanes, the lack of clear statutory authorization has resulted in confusion, excessive administrative hurdles, and limited access for pilots who wish to operate here legally and safely. I want to talk to you a little bit about the approval process. The current approval process is very scattered. First, you must identify who owns or manages a particular body of water. For lakes managed by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, a pilot must submit a formal request to the district engineer, but the request is not specific to an individual. It's requesting access for all seaplanes on that body of water. Seeking permission for that, then the Corps must seek to evaluate the safety, compatibility, and public interest consideration, and then formally designate an operating area under their code, which is 36 CFR Part 327. In practice, reaching this stage is nearly impossible, and it just hasn't been done here in Kansas. If the lake is owned by KDWP, Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks, pilots must seek written authorization directly from the agency. The authorization often includes time of day restrictions, seasonal restrictions, designated operating areas, and insurance requirements. In practice, reaching this stage is rare, and individual authorization is nearly impossible. For city, county, and privately owned bodies of water, you must seek written authorization from the owner, and then you would just verify your compliance with all existing ordinances in the city, county, or for the private owner of the water, as well as continue to apply by the federal aviation regulations. At the same time, the FAA has already regulated seaplanes extensively across the country. So right now, you must have a private pilot certificate, which is what I'm working on, and then on top of that, an airplane single-engine land rating or higher, and obtain an additional single-engine C or multi-engine C rating. You will train with a certified seaplane instructor, you log specialized water operations, and successfully complete a practical test with a designated pilot examiner, or otherwise known as a check ride. The pilot must also hold a valid medical certificate. With all of those, the aircraft itself must be airworthy, equipped with floats installed under an FAA-approved supplemental type certificate. An STC is something that you get when a certified mechanic installs the floats, so you couldn't just do this in your garage or in your hangar. You would have to go to an FAA-approved STC, and then it would be properly weighed and balanced, and then it's compliant with all Part 91 equipment regulations. Once on the water, seaplanes are treated as vessels, and so they're subject to navigation rules, like speed restrictions and right-of-way, just like any other boat that you would operate or be able to rent here in Kansas. In short, there's already significant safeguards for seaplane aviation, not just for the FAA and then regulated under FAR, but then also for the boats that are already regulated here in Kansas. So you're abiding by your air traffic rules, and then you're abiding by maritime. So once you hit that water, you automatically switch over to your new rules. Missouri is considered one of the most seaplane-friendly states in the Midwest, and they have found a way to make this work. Our neighbors to the south in Oklahoma have done the same. And as the air capital of the world, I really do believe that Kansas should have clear, modern statute that reflects the current aviation practices. HB 2687 does provide that clarity. It affirms that seaplanes are lawful aircraft in Kansas, and it removes unnecessary regulatory uncertainty that currently prevents access to otherwise suitable water landing sites. I might add that it only takes a couple hundred feet to land and take off for these seaplanes, which is not a lot of distance. It takes about the same for me to try and pull somebody on a tube behind me. The bill doesn't change who regulates aviation. It changes whether Kansas law clearly recognizes seaplanes at all. It improves the clarity, it supports the safety, and it brings Kansas in line with our neighboring states. I just don't want to see us left behind as the aviation capital of the world. Right now, I think in addition to this, it's important to note the commerce perspective. And so we have many flight aviation schools here in the state that would now be able to offer seaplane ratings, have seaplane instructors, and then also teach students to install floats, those FAA-approved STCs. With the presence of seaplanes comes a demand for fuel, which increases the profitability of FBOs and airports, especially in our rural areas. And for a lot of those rural areas, that's how they make money to make improvements on their land, on their grounds, to their hangars, to their runway, and then also to get further approval for the FAA to install additional hangars, which there is a shortage of across the country. From an economic standpoint, this bill attempts to invest into the state. It contributes to our state aviation pride, it encourages education and innovation, and it simply cuts government red tape. As the committee deliberates House Bill 2687, I respectfully urge favorable consideration for its passage. Thank you for the opportunity to submit proponent testimony. And with that, Mr. Chair, I will stand for questions.
Thank you, Representative. Do you have a committee that you need to get back to?
I do not.
Okay, do you mind waiting and we're going to run through everybody and have everybody come back for questions?
If it's at the will of the chair, absolutely.
Thank you. We're going to go on and kind of run through everybody, give them a chance to speak, then we'll come back and ask questions. So next up I have Representative Johnson, but I don't see Johnson here. So he said he may not be able to make it, so we're going to move Johnson to written only. And next up is Justin Coletti. Justin, welcome to committee.
I'm well, sir. How are yourself? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry?
Could you repeat that again?
I said welcome to committee.
Oh, thank you, sir. I apologize. I'm hard of hearing. Representatives and Chairman, thank you for your opportunity today. I'd like to voice not only my opinion, but give you some insight from the flight training side for the bill that the representative just mentioned, 2687. I'm the general manager and flight instructor here in Topeka at Billard Airport. We run roughly a 4-ship operation. We are roughly 2,000 hours a year in flight instruction. And we have been working with the Corps of Engineers to attempt to open up Perry Lake and Clinton Lake for seaplane operations. That opportunity has been met with some smoke and mirrors and has been very difficult and confusing at the best. Seaplane, though, has a deep history within our nation's context. When aviation travel was beginning, the main airport areas were lakes and riverbeds and coastlines. That was the only way at the time that you could move across the country using aircraft. So in support of this bill, it would be bringing Kansas back in time in the future to allow seaplane operations, which would be right along with our historical context of the state. Currently now, there are no seaplanes north of Salina. The state is split up into 2 Corps of Engineer districts. North of Salina is the Kansas City district, and south of Salina is the Oklahoma City district. The Oklahoma City district is open and responsive to seaplane usage. In fact, Textron Aviation has used lakes on the west side of Wichita and on the east side of Wichita to certify their Cessna, 208 caravans. Since then, I've seen or heard of no formal use of seaplanes within the state since I've been in the state for a few years. And so with that, I'd like to, again, urge your consideration for the bill and allow seaplane usage in all the lakes around Kansas. So thank you for your time, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Justin. Next up, I have Jared Gerritsen. I apologize if I butchered that last name. Jared, welcome to committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee. My name is Jared Gerritsen, and I'm a resident of Manhattan, Kansas, and a constituent of the bill sponsor, a private pilot, and I'm the owner of Gerritsen Aviation. Thank you for the opportunity to provide this testimony. So Gerritsen Aviation is a company that my wife and I founded in 2021 after both attending Kansas State University. And we decided we didn't want to go back to the farm too bad and work in the field, so we'd come up with something creative. We buy, sell, and trade aircraft in Manhattan and Junction City. And we also have a Build Assist program where we bring in customers from all over the country to build what I believe are the most capable backcountry airplanes in the world. We allow these guys to build their dream plane in our facilities here in Kansas. And so what I believe HB 2687 would allow or promote would would be to offer these guys amphibious floats with these aircraft that are already extremely capable in short field operations. That would allow us to give them better educational opportunities so they can get their seaplane ratings in Kansas. They could fly their own airplane and practice in the airplane that they're going to be using when they're out on their own missions. I think it also provides many benefits for other Kansas pilots from an educational perspective. There's lots of students at Kansas State Salina. There's a flight school in Manhattan. There's one in Junction City. There's flight schools all over the state. And the ability to get seaplane ratings would be fantastic and would also help guys just learn new perspectives on safety and operating aircraft all over the country. I think that it would boost tourism and help with rural economies. And we can expand aviation access without building any new infrastructure. So anywhere that we've got water that's suitably deep is a new landing zone, potentially. I think it would also help support emergency and public service operations like search and rescue and firefighting. There's some really neat aircraft out there that their floats actually run a pipeline up into the hopper and allow them to pick up water on the lakes as they're cruising through to go fight fires really effectively. And then on the search and rescue side, that's something that I've been a part of in the past, but haven't had to utilize any lakes or anything that way, but it's something that I happily volunteer my time and resources to anytime we get the call from our local law enforcement. It also this bill encourages aviation business growth. We've got fuel sales, FBOs, service centers, and all kinds of places throughout the state that would help strengthen our small businesses and help with our innovation. Let's see here. In addition, I'm here with my family this morning. I brought my wife, Ashley, and our 2 children, my son, Jet, and my daughter, Georgia. He's 4, and he loves to fly with me. And we've got a really neat little house on Tuttle Lake. We also own a seaplane, and I can't legally operate it here in the state at this time, but he and I go for lots of fun flights, and I just think it'd be really cool to get to share flying that airplane out and landing on Tuttle Lake and taxiing up to go light a fire in the stove or just enjoy some time away from work. I'm sure as many of you guys are aware, owning a small business is no small undertaking. It requires lots of time and dedication. And so I really enjoy trying to maximize as much time with my family as I can because it's very limited. And so I think this bill would also promote being able to maximize recreational time with my children. And I think it would do that for other Kansas business owners as well. Kansas Aviation stands for freedom, innovation, and opportunity. And as someone who lives here, works here, and is raising my family here, I want law that encourages and values accountability, transparency, and safety in doing things the right way. For these reasons, I respectfully urge the committee to give House Bill 2687 favorable consideration. Thank you for your time and the opportunity to provide testimony.
Thank you, Jared. Next up, we have Carrie Gooch. Carrie, welcome to committee.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Gary Gooch. I am not up here representing any client today. I'm actually just up here representing myself as a big aviation enthusiast. I'm born and raised in Wichita, Kansas, come from a long line of aviation family. My grandfather was a pilot. My dad was a pilot. In my family, you had to get your pilot's license before you got your driver's license. So just always been a big fan of general aviation. I've owned an airplane myself for almost 10 years now. 1960 Beechcraft Bonanza that was actually built right in Wichita, Kansas. And so as I fly that airplane all across the country, one thing we do as pilots a lot is study the rules and regulations of the different states and cities that we fly in. And when I talk to my friends in Kansas and outside of Kansas, one of the biggest confusions we have is what are the regulations when it comes to seaplane operation here in Kansas. When you read the statute, it's just just not very clear at all. And so I'm going to keep my testimony short because I know we have a lot of great other people, but I'm really excited about this piece of legislation. I think it will clear up a lot of things. I think it will help bring in more tourism into Kansas. I think it will open up a whole new operation that we aren't seeing in Kansas right now. So thank you guys, and I seriously urge you to support House Bill 2087. Thank you.
Thank you, Kerry. Next up, we have Steve McCaughey on WebEx. Steve, are you there? Nope, Steve's not there. Okay. I'm sorry? Go ahead, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Representatives. Angel Roser. Steve texted me and let me know he did not receive a link for the WebEx, but he is ready to join it.
Okay. We're going to circle back to Representative Johnson. I don't see Representative Johnson still, so we're definitely moving him to written only. So while we're waiting for that link to come up, I think we'll go ahead and entertain some questions. Committee, do we have questions for the conferees? Representative Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm still confused. Is it illegal to fly seaplanes in Kansas, or is it just difficult to know what the law allows?
Mr. Chair, Representative, thank you for your question. Right now, it's not explicitly stated in statute. When you receive your private pilot certificate or beyond, part of that training is that federal FAA law is the explicit law, right? And so FAA requires you, or FAR requires you, that if it's not explicitly stated, it is not implicitly allowed. So I can't say, it doesn't say in statute, or does it define seaplane in statute as a vessel, which it does for boats and jet skis and things of that nature. And so since it doesn't explicitly state a seaplane as a vessel, I can't implicitly decide to land a seaplane, well, on any lake, because I don't have my private pilot license. But as a pilot, I wouldn't be able to do it, and I can't use assumed law in aviation. Does that help answer your question, Representative?
So is it illegal to fly a seaplane in Kansas?
No, Representative. Thank you for your question, Mr. Chair. No, it's not illegal to fly a seaplane. You can fly a seaplane and land it on a runway. You can't
But
land
I can't
it.
land it on water.
Correct. So in theory, I could, I guess, start somewhere in Missouri, fly over the Kansas airspace, and come back to Missouri. That would be legal. You can fly it in the airspace. You would not be able to land it or take off on the water. Thank you, Representative.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Committee, any other questions? Representative Poskins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and it would be for you, Representative. The title just says prohibiting any governmental agency from regulating landings or takeoff. I'm confused that like a county would not be able to make regulations about their own lakes in their area. We're just saying that no government entity can make any regulations for their bodies of water.
Mr. Chair, Representative, thank you for the question. So the reason why it was written that way is it also includes in the bill that it says unless there's something to the contrary. And so if there's already one, especially if it has to do with the depth of the lake, right? And so if the body of water is more like a lagoon or a marsh, then if there's a statute that would prohibit that, then you would be correct. They would still be able to regulate that body of water. It's my understanding.
Committee, any other questions? Representative Haskins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is for Mr. Garrettson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Representative.
I want to first thank you for your testimony. I also want to thank you for bringing your family and your children. I think it's important that we have advocates from all ages, and this is a good example of what we need. My question for you, though, is if this bill is passed, how do you see the growth of your industry occurring, and will that have any economic value for the state?
Sure, yeah. Obviously, any time that we remove restriction, inherently there is some benefit to the economic side. So, Yeah, I mean, if this bill passes and we're able to operate seaplanes on bodies of water, then that would allow us to receive flight training and bring in students from anywhere else in the country. We've got guys coming to the state of Kansas from all over the United States to receive flight training. And I think that is really the primary benefit economically. These people are staying in our hotels, they're eating at our restaurants, and they're coming out here to recreate as well. And there's some of those. One thing that I do think is worth mentioning or clarifying, at least the way I understand the bill, what we would like is for aquatic aircraft to be treated the same as boats, so that these bodies of water that allow motorized boats would allow seaplane operations. So, yeah, this was, I guess, goes back to a question from Representative Poskin earlier. And so any of these bodies of water that don't already allow, motorized boats, they wouldn't be obligated to allow seaplane operations. But we're just looking for equality, I guess, if you want to go that way. So anyway, thank you, Mr.
Go ahead, Representative.
Thank you. And this, thank you for that. This question is for Mr. Gooch. Gooch? Mr. Gooch?
I was going to get out of here without a question. Okay.
No. This one's pretty simple. If I don't believe that you can fly and a plane, are you willing to take the committee on a field trip? And how many can ride in your plane at a time?
I have to double check to make sure I wasn't breaking any ethics violations by giving rides to legislators in my airplane, but I would love to take any member of the committee or any member of the legislature up in an airplane. I think it's one of the things I have the most joy of being able to do is giving people their first ride in what a lot of people consider a small airplane, right? Most people have never been to an airport, right? And secondly, most people have never been on a small, civilian or general aviation airplane. And if you haven't done that, Senator Owens and Representative Roser have started a aviation caucus. I really urge you all to join that. Aviation is a big part of, obviously, Kansas history, and you'd be shocked at the amount of airports that are around Kansas. And so if you've never had an opportunity, feel free to find me. I would love to take you up on an airplane ride anytime.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, colleagues, for my sense of humor and teasing.
Representative McNorton.
I apologize, I was a little bit late, and if this question has been answered. So I have a question. I've ridden on float planes, seaplanes before, up in Alaska fishing. They would go down the river and make sure there wasn't somebody out there fly fishing or a sandbar, gravel bar, or something before they'd make the landing. What would be the regulation at Lake Perry or one of these lakes that have recreational boats on them that are traveling back and forth, up and down? How would that work? Obviously, an airport has a runway and the highway's over here to prevent. How would that work, I guess?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative, for your question. I have a two-part for that. I actually brought an expert with me, my flight instructor, and so to Representative Haskins' question, you would not want to fly alone with me, but you would want to fly alone with him. Mr. Chair, if it's at the will of what you desire, would it be okay to bring in an expert to answer that question, since it's a regulation question? He did submit written testimony.
That would be fine.
Okay, thank you.
Just welcome to the committee. State your name for it.
Harrison Deaton. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, representatives. So that's a great question for any airplane, whether it's a water plane, seaplane, or just your regular Cessna 172. FAR 91-119 has very clear guidelines on that. And so it basically says, except for when necessary for takeoff or landing, no person may operate an aircraft below the following altitudes. And basically it just goes through and says, just anywhere in general, an altitude allowing if a power unit fails, an emergency landing without undue hazard to persons or property on the surface. So basically that just means don't fly too low, you can't make a safe landing if your engine fails, right? And that's just in non-congested areas, anything like that. Over congested areas, so if you're flying over, you know, the city of Manhattan going into Tuttle Creek Lake, right? You have to stay 1,000 feet above the city at all times. And that just allows safe glide distance if there's an emergency. It keeps you away from people, noise ordinances, things like that. If it's a non-congested area, you have to stay at least 500 feet away from any person or vessel. So if you're coming in to land at a lake, you stay 500 feet above the lake, make sure there's nobody within range of you, and then you can safely make a landing. Does that answer your question?
Yes, yes, thank you.
I think we're going to circle back and see if we can catch up with Steve McCaughey. Steve? Nope, still not there? Okay. We're going to go ahead and move Steve's testimony to written only. And committee, any final question? Not seeing any. We're going to close that section of the hearing, and we're going to, I do want to point out we do have several written testimonies on there as well. We do have neutral testimony from Curtis Wired. Welcome to committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that. People rarely get my last name correct. So, I'm Curtis Wired. I'm the Chief Counsel for the Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks. Thank you for the opportunity to provide some neutral testimony on this bill. I will keep it brief. Quite frankly, this is not an issue. In the limited time I had to prepare this testimony, I checked with our people. This is not an issue that our department faces hardly at all. I think you could tell probably from the comments that come from proponent testimony that people are talking about landing seaplanes on federal reservoirs in the state. The department manages, so we manage the fisheries and we do enforce boating laws on federal reservoirs. However, when there are specific regulations by the Corps of Engineers or the Bureau of Reclamation, obviously under the Supremacy Clause, any regulation that they have would override any of ours. So in short, we don't deal, we can't deal with seaplanes when it comes to federal reservoirs. That's solely a federal issue. So this, and like I said, when I spoke to our people, this is not a matter that our department is regularly confronted with. This sounds like it might be an emerging issue in the state, but it's not something that we address. So that's why we're submitting neutral testimony. With that, I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Committee, any questions? Not seeing any. Thank you, Curtis.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Well, that is all the testimony we have for this. So with that, I'm going to close HB 2687. We're going to move now to open up a hearing on HB 2687. And to bring us up to speed, Kyle will, or, oh, 2727, I apologize. Yeah, I just reread the HB that we just closed. 2727. Kyle, yeah, if you'll get us up to speed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, House Bill 2727 would allow plaintiffs to elect to limit recovery and claims brought for violations of the Women's Right to Know Act, and it would make laws providing for medical malpractice screening inapplicable when such election is made. Under current law, any physician who intentionally, knowingly, or recklessly fails to provide information under KSA 656709 of the Women's Right to Know Act is deemed to be guilty of unprofessional conduct as defined in the Kansas Healing Arts Act. Additionally, the Act allows certain individuals to bring a civil action against the physician if information about mifepristone is not provided in accordance with KSA 656716. Under current law, when a petition is filed in a district court seeking damages for personal injury arising from the alleged medical malpractice of a healthcare provider, a medical malpractice screening panel must be convened upon either party's request. The screening panel process can take up to 180 days to conclude, and at its conclusion, the panel submits its opinion to the parties and the judge. And this process is laid out in KSA 65-4904. House Bill 2727 would insert a new section of law allowing plaintiffs in any action brought under 65-6709, which concerns information that's required to be given to patients before an abortion, or under 65-6716, which concerns notice to patients receiving medication abortion. That plaintiff can elect to limit their own recovery to damages to $5,000, plus the costs of the abortion and reasonable attorney fees. If a plaintiff makes such an election, the provisions of the medical malpractice screening panels would not apply. Section C would state that nothing in the section shall limit or otherwise affect any action brought under KSA 65-6716H, and that medical malpractice screening panel provisions are inapplicable to claims brought under that provision. HB 2727 would become effective upon publication in the statute book. With that, I'd be happy to take any preliminary questions.
Committee, any questions? Seeing none, thank you, Kyle. I'm going to open up the proponent side of this, and first up is Lucretia Nold. Lucretia, welcome back to committee.
Good morning, Chair Kessler and members of the committee. As you know, I'm Lucretia Nold. I work for the Kansas Catholic Conference, where I represent the Catholic Bishops of Kansas. And we stand in full support of HB 2727. Women who have felt harmed by the abortion industry rarely come forward and initiate lawsuits. This is for many reasons. They often feel embarrassed, ashamed, and feel intimidated with the thought of going up against doctors in the abortion industry. Another reason is the financial barrier. So often, the abortion industry preys on the poverty of women. Since a multitude of post-abortive women have repeatedly said their reason for choosing abortion was financially based, they didn't feel they had the money to raise a child. In addition to what I have just mentioned, the thought of filing a lawsuit can simply be daunting, especially when one thinks of time and attorney fees. HB 2727 is designed to help alleviate any burden or fear a woman might have when filing a lawsuit. It streamlines the statutory damages these women acquired due to the lack of information provided to them leading up to or after the time of their abortion. The woman's right to know was implemented almost 30 years ago. So for some of us, that's almost been a lifetime. This was created because women deserve to have all information, to have truth, before making any life-changing decision. Unfortunately, women have felt uninformed and cheated when not provided with all this information. An example of this can be found from just a few months ago. At a recent trial in Johnson County, myself and others spent almost 2 weeks listening to why having information provided in the woman's right to know is so vital. During the time, 3 witnesses were brought to the stand and testified under oath. All 3 shared their personal and emotional story of their abortion. All 3 stated that they were not fully informed. Little to no information was provided to them prior to making a life-impacting decision. All 3 affirmed that if given information like that found in the woman's right to know, they would have made a different decision. They would have chosen life and not abortion. Women, like the ones I just mentioned, deserve to be fully informed and provided with truth. When information is withheld, when truth is withheld, causing them to make an ill-informed decision, these women then have a right to seek justice. HB 2727 will help women seek justice for the harm and damages inflicted on them from not receiving the women's right to know information. Their statutory rights were dismissed and violated. The abortion industry left them in the dark. These women deserve a simple and easy process in obtaining the justice they are due, which is exactly what HB 2727 will provide. Therefore, the Kansas Catholic Conference provides its support for HB 2727 and asks the committee for your support as well. Thank you, and I'll stand for questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you, Lucretia. We only have a couple people talking here, so we're going to go ahead and go through that, and we'll come back to questions.
Okay.
So, thank you. And next up, we have Brittany Jones. Brittany, welcome back to committee.
Chairman Kessler, members of the committee, thank you so much for having me again. I am Brittany Jones, and I'm president of Kansas Family Voice, and we are so grateful for the opportunity to testify in favor of HB 2027, which gives women real means to enforce the law if their rights are violated. HB 2727 creates a streamlined statutory damages mechanism for women to enforce their rights under the Women's Right to Know Act. The Women's Right to Know Act guarantees Kansas women the right to receive truthful, scientifically accurate information before undergoing an abortion. It requires disclosure of the procedure's risk and alternatives, information about the developing child, notice of available support services, and other material information. These protections exist because this body recognized, and the trial record is clear, that without them, women often do not know or receive adequate informed consent. The key provisions of HB 2727 allow women alleging a violation of informed consent requirements to limit her recovery, as was explained, and if the plaintiff makes the election, this case does not go through the medical malpractice screening panel, which is often dominated by the very advocates who violated her rights in the first place. Current enforcement is insufficient for a woman who has been harmed to be made whole. A woman who has not been told about the risk of abortion, who is not informed that she could withdraw her consent, or has not been given the opportunity to view an ultrasound may suffer quantifiable economic damages, and it may not suffer quantifiable economic damages in a traditional sense. Yet the violation of her statutory rights is real, and those are serious, and this body should give her a mechanism to be made whole. Under current Kansas law, medical malpractice claims include claims arising from failures of informed consent must first be submitted to medical malpractice screening panel, as was discussed, and this process adds time, cost, and complexity that can deter a woman from vindicating her rights. Statutory damages are well established in American law and Kansas law, and Congress and state legislatures routinely provide statutory damages when the harm from a violation is real but difficult to quantify. A $5,000 recovery is a very modest recovery for this sort of claim. It's very reasonable and proportionate. It's sufficient to make enforcement meaningful combined with the recovery of amounts paid for the abortion and reasonable attorney fees. The proposed amendment does not replace any existing remedy, it supplements them. A woman who suffers significant and actual damages retains the full range of tort remedies available to her under the current law, and the statutory damage election is simply an additional option for a woman whose primary injury is the denial of her statutory rights. This is why we ask that you pass HB 2727 out favorably, and I stand available for questions at the appropriate time. Thank you.
Thank you. Committee, any questions? Representative Lewis.
Thank you, Chair. This is for the first conferee, Lucretia, I'm sorry.
Yes, good morning.
Thank you for testimony. You mentioned a testimony that you watched, and I'm interested in knowing a little bit more. What was that proceeding? And I think you suggested that the claims were dismissed, but I'd be interested in the details. If you can
Chair
give
Kessler, Representative Lewis, I believe you're referring to the trial that I had attended a few months ago this fall in Johnson County.
Yes.
It was, and I'm drawing a blank on the name, so perhaps Ms. Jones or Mrs. Gowden can help remind me of the name, but It was a trial against the state of Kansas suing the Women's Right to Know Act.
And what was the result of the lawsuit? If you, or would you prefer that somebody else answer it?
We don't have results at this time.
Okay, but they're suing the state of Kansas under the current law.
Correct, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Clayton.
Thank you. Oh, and sorry about that, Lucretia. My question was similar in line to the previous representatives. If you could tell the committee how we could access that testimony so that we could see what those individuals said, I think that that would be pretty edifying information for us to have. So if either you or Brittany or someone could get that information, that specific testimony of those witnesses to us, I would be grateful. Thank you.
Yes, Chair Kessler, Representative Clayton, yes, we will happy to get you the transcripts from that trial so you guys can read and review.
Representative Poskin with 1S.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. My question is for Ms. Jones, please. Thanks for being here. And do I remember that you are an attorney, right? Or, yeah, sorry.
Chairman, Representative Poskin, yes, I am.
Oh, okay, great. Well, I think that's a good person then. So the way I read this bill, it would not do anything for a woman who was actually harmed by giving the right to know, women's right to know information regarding an abortion reversal pill kind of thing. If somebody suffered damage from being told that information and being provided that information under this act, it wouldn't help them in any way. Is that, do I understand that correctly?
Chairman, Representative Poskin, so the statutory right that the state of Kansas has granted to the woman is to receive the information in the women's right to know. So it has nothing to do with how that's received. And so that would have to be a different
bill. Okay,
Correct.
Thank you.
Not seeing any more? Oh, Representative Wagner.
Yes, thank you. And this is for Ms. Jones. So I'm just trying to understand the standard system that a claim like this would go through some medical malpractice screening panel, and then it would go to court or something, and this just makes it a much quicker process, or exactly how would they be, get their requested amount of $5,000? I mean, what finding of fact has to happen, or how does that happen?
Chairman Kessler, Representative Wagner. So currently, a medical malpractice claim goes to a screening panel, and as the revisor stated, it takes about 180 days for them to go through their process. That screening panel is made up of doctors or medical professionals who are of the same profession and that practice in the same area as the defendant in that case. And so, especially in cases of abortion, they're very typically rejected because of that, as well as attorneys and other, so it can include lay people. And so this simply allows the woman not to elect to go through that process and essentially speeds up the trial process. They would, you'd still have to go through some of the normal mechanisms of the actual legal system, but you remove the medical screening panel.
So it still goes to court? I mean, it would still have a court hearing and all that?
I mean, you'd have to have an official ruling on it, yes.
I see. All right, thank you.
And for the record, to answer the question, the trial that we reference is Hodes and Nauser versus Kobach.
I want to take just a second here. Jean, I don't have any testimony. Did you submit testimony and was expected to speak? If that's the case, come on up, and I apologize, we're looking for it right now.
Thank you, Chairman Kessler, members of the committee. I apologize, but I did submit written testimony Tuesday evening and verified with the committee assistant that she received it. So I just want to say I'm Jean Gowden, Director of Government Relations with Kansans for Life, and I appreciate the opportunity to testify in support of House Bill 2727. And my colleagues have already spoken about a lot of the important points I think that you need to know about this. And first of all, just personally, I have been involved in the process for the 30 years that the Women's Right to Know has been involved and has been law, and have testified at just dozens of hearings over the years to update the law with information that women deserve to have, such as seeing the ultrasound if they choose, hearing the heartbeat, et cetera. And, you know, it was passed back in '97 with bipartisan support. And it was after women every year would come in and testify as to the fact that they did not get information like fetal development, like what are the risks, what are the alternatives of abortion, and what help is out there for them. So, you know, the protections that are now given to women under the Women's Right to Know Act are only as strong as their enforcement mechanism. And so that's what House Bill 2727 is about. It would secure streamlined consumer protection for those all too often rushed procedures without affecting medical malpractice rights, as Ms. Jones has mentioned. So when women whose right to informed consent has been violated, they will have the option of selecting to recover statutory damages, once again in the amount of $5,000, plus any costs that they paid for the abortion and reasonable attorney's fees. So I think it's important to remember the election is voluntary, and if she suffered greater damages, she certainly is free to be able to sue for those actual damages and compensatory damages. So I think that's very important to know. Once again, sitting at the trial against the Women's Right to Know Act, it became very evident why enforcement of the Women's Right to Know Act is so critical. Because, for example, Planned Parenthood's own patients had filed complaints describing their treatment as mechanical, these are in quotes, mechanical, callous, and like being herded like cattle. And the lack of information, quote, should be illegal. So there is a conflict of interest when it comes to informed consent, because an abortionist's financial interest in performing abortions is at odds with a woman's desire to get complete information and make a choice that is truly voluntary. Back when Kansas legislature, passed an updated consent form, it's been several years, the reason they did so is because they were presented with appalling examples of the abortion business's online maneuvering of informed consent. For example, information was very often in very small type and in light print, so it made it very difficult for women to be able to read this. And so we think it's really important to ensure that women have a simple and effective mechanism to obtain relief, especially considering the fact that 3/4 of the women who have abortions in Kansas are from out of state. And others may be intimidated by the prospect of facing a time-consuming and burdensome medical malpractice screening panel. So I would like to ask the committee on behalf of Kansans for Life to ensure that if an abortionist cuts corners on informed consent, that there are real consequences. And for a woman whose primary injury is the denial of her statutory right to informed consent, the statutory damages selection's an additional option. And we ask you to please find House Bill 2727 favorable for passage. Thank you. And I will stand for questions.
Thank you, Jean.
If you have any, thank you.
Body, any questions? Representative Myers.
Thank you. Actually, and thank you for being here, but this one is for Brittany. Sorry, I didn't
thank you.
Get in before. Hi.
Hello.
Thank you. Okay, so I had a question. It's about the process. So I'm a little concerned about this because we would be eliminating the medical malpractice aspect of it. What would this process look like in the end? Because my concern, I think, is that this would bring frivolous lawsuits and things like that. And just people from out of state, as previously mentioned, could say, oh, well, I need a quick $5,000. Let's go in quick, but 180 days, but still fairly quick. Could you tell me about the process?
Absolutely, Chairman, Representative. I would argue that it would not, since you still have to go through all the other legal process, you still have the opportunity to kick out anything that's frivolous. The courts are very good at eliminating frivolous lawsuits. These medical malpractice screening panels, however, tend to stop these claims before they've even gone anywhere, and they also drag it out further. And so in this particular case, it is, as Ms. Nold discussed, because there's so much going on in these situations, ensuring that this is a streamlined process and that a woman can actually have her day in court is very important.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, so just kind of to follow up on that, I think really what I'm worried about then is that who is going to actually decide how these cases get heard, and what is that process really going to look like? Because I'm not hearing anything about the process. The medical malpractice screening really helps, streamline this, I think, a little bit more, especially since we have medical providers on that panel who are familiar with the processes that go through it. So it sounds like to me what this bill would do is just let women file a lawsuit and just go into the courts.
Chair Kessler, Representative, a woman can file a lawsuit. Yes, it does allow that. But the normal mechanisms of the legal system, who is deciding this case is a judge in a duly in a court of law in the state of Kansas. And so those normal processes in which we hear other cases all the time, that is the process that a woman would go through. And the judge in the Hodes and Nauser case specifically said that his rulings had in no way limited a woman's rights through the civil process to ensure that her rights were protected. Thank you.
Not seeing any more on my list. Representative McNorton, I apologize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Jones, so the way I read this, it limits the amount to $5,000, but both sides have to agree to that. The plaintiff just can't say, I want $5,000. The doctor, whoever's being sued, has to agree to that plea deal, if you want to say, instead of going further. Is that correct, the way I'm reading this?
Chairman, Representative McNorton, a plea deal language is normally for the criminal side and the civil, but
I'm not a lawyer.
No, you're doing just fine. To a certain extent, that is it's an apt comparison. Essentially, the woman is saying, I don't want the medical malpractice screening panel, but I'm giving up the potential of actually recovering more. In some cases, she probably could recover more than $5,000, but because she's foregoing the medical screening panel, she's limiting her recovery. And so it's it balances out a little bit to a certain extent, and it streamlines the process for the court system.
If I could.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So both sides of the case have to agree to that $5,000. Is that correct? The doctor being sued or whoever that is, would have to say, we agree, we'll go with the $5,000 instead of going to the board's decision. We'll agree on the.
Chairman, Representative McNorton. From my understanding, the court and the woman are agreeing. It's not necessarily like the defendant necessarily agrees, because she's the one opting not to go through the screening panel.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Now I'm not seeing any more. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all I had on the proponent side of this, and I'm going to now open up the opponent side of this. And first and only up this right now is Taylor Morton. Taylor, welcome to committee. Welcome back to committee.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, members of the committee. My name is Taylor Morton. I am the Legislative Affairs and Organizing Manager with Planned Parenthood Great Plains Votes, which is the advocacy and political arm of Planned Parenthood Great Plains. PPGP offers comprehensive sexual and reproductive health care at 4 health centers located in Kansas. I'm here today to voice opposition to House Bill 2727, which amends the Women's Right to Know Act specifically as it pertains to medical malpractice and claims brought for violations of the act. House Bill 2727 would allow plaintiffs to limit their recovery to $5,000 if they bypass medical malpractice screening panels that are typically required in such a case. We've already discussed this in committee. But this makes it easier to file baseless lawsuits against abortion providers. This bill serves to increase burdens on providers and stigmatize the provision of abortion care, and it does not fix the problems inherent to the Women's Right to Know Act. House Bill 2727 functions only to intimidate abortion providers with the threat of baseless lawsuits and provides no benefit to patient safety. Abortion providers in Kansas are licensed by the Kansas State Board of Healing Arts and adhere to strict guidelines governing the practice of medicine. If a provider's services are ever in question, the state is empowered to review and investigate complaints about quality of care and competence. And medical malpractice claims can be brought against any healthcare provider who deviates from the accepted standards of care, resulting in harm to a patient. Abortion is safe and common, and informed consent is a cornerstone of abortion care. Women in the U.S. experience complications less than 1% of the time, and the risk of complication or mortality from abortion is less than that from common procedures like wisdom tooth removal, cancer screening colonoscopies, and many types of plastic surgery. House Bill 2727 does nothing to benefit patient safety. Like I said, it only seeks to stigmatize and intimidate abortion providers. What's more, this bill goes against the will of Kansans who overwhelmingly support abortion access and oppose unnecessary restrictions on abortion care. Kansans deserve to be heard and for their laws to reflect their will. So with that, I do urge the committee to oppose House Bill 2727. Thank you. I'll stand for questions when appropriate.
Committee, any questions? Representative Clayton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for being here today. The testimony from the proponents got me thinking, and I'm not entirely sure what this would or wouldn't cover, but so we have women who are bringing suits because they do not feel like they got informed consent from healthcare providers. But would this cover people who were not properly informed, say if they went to a pregnancy center and they were told, things that were not necessarily true, which we have documented evidence that that happens? Would that protect them as well? Would they be able to bring suit?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Huh, okay. I appreciate you. Thanks for being here. That's just worth bringing up.
Committee, any other questions? Representative Wagner.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Birchfield. For your testimony, I'm a little puzzled. You do agree that abortion providers do have to follow the law of the state of Kansas, do they not?
Absolutely.
And so if they break a bipartisan bill that has withstood court challenges and et cetera, there really should be no exception to the fact that they should be held accountable for breaking the law.
Of course, abortion providers, like any healthcare professional, should be held to the highest standards of medical practice and patient care.
And legal consistency?
Abortion providers in the state of Kansas do follow state regulation and comply with necessary requirements implemented by the state.
And the Women's Right to Know Act is one of those, if I may, Mr. Chairman, would be considered one of those. I mean, it hasn't been struck down by the court. It is a legally binding law, correct?
It is a law. The Women's Right to Know, the case that has been discussed in this hearing already is with the judge awaiting a final ruling. But as of currently, there are restrictions and regulations in the Women's Right to Know Act that have been challenged and preliminarily blocked, again, pending that final ruling. So, yes.
Okay, Taylor, not seeing any more. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
I would like to point out we do have written testimony on this as well. In that, and we have no neutral testimony. So with that, I'm going to close the hearing on HB 2727. And we're now going to open up the hearing on HB 2729. And Kyle will bring us up to speed on that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Under current law, at least 24 hours before an abortion, the physician who is to perform the abortion or the referring physician is required to provide the woman seeking an abortion with certain written information. The bill would require such form to be provided by the Kansas Department of Health and Environment, either on white paper or in a hard copy format or electronically transmitted to the woman. You can see this change on page 1 of the bill in line 15. Additionally, under current law, any private office, freestanding surgical outpatient clinic, or other facility or clinic in which abortions are performed, except when performed when necessary to prevent the death of the pregnant woman, is required to post a notice that is clearly visible to patients that contains specific information. The bill would amend the required posted notice and form concerning mifepristone to add references to the Kansas Department of Health and Environment, in addition to the posting that I previously mentioned. House Bill 2729 would become effective upon publication in the statute book. With that, I'd be happy to take any preliminary questions.
Committee, any questions? Seeing none, thank you, Kyle. And we're going to open up the oral proponent side of this. And first up, Brittany Jones. Hey, welcome back to committee, Brittany. Now, y'all, everybody understands I typically don't like to limit people talking, but we are running out of time, and I want to make sure we have plenty of time for questions. So if you could we all have your testimony here, so if we can kind of highlight some stuff and try to keep it within about 2 minutes. And
Absolutely, I will do my best.
Thank you very much.
Chairman Kessler, members of the committee, my name is Brittany Jones. I am the president of Kansas Family Voice and an attorney. We are grateful for the opportunity to explain why HB 2729 strengthens the constitutional foundation of the state's current women's right to know law. At trial, in the Hodes and Nauser versus Kobach case, the plaintiff abortion providers testified under oath that they treat Women's Right to Know Act as the speech of the state of Kansas. Under established First Amendment jurisprudence, when the government speaks its own message, it does not violate the free speech rights of the private parties whom it requires to transmit the message. The government speech doctrine recognized by the United States Supreme Court holds that the government may express its own views without being subject to free speech challenges by those who disagree. And that's exactly what HB 2729 is ensuring is clear in our law when we deal with informed consent in the state of Kansas. The proposed amendments to Women's Right to Know Act accomplish this objective by requiring the KDHE to provide the informed consent forms that the physician must use, and by mandating that the disclosures be provided on a form provided by the KDHE. The amendments eliminate any ambiguity of whose speech is being provided. By codifying the government's free speech framework through the KDHE provided forms, these amendments ensure that any future speech challenges to the women's right to know are clear about whose speech is being provided, and that there is no way the provider's speech. The state of Kansas has every right to communicate truthful, scientifically supported information to women considering abortion. It may do so through its own instrumentalities, including the KDHE. Abortion providers cannot claim that their speech is being compelled when they are merely delivering the government's own speech. By establishing that the Women's Right to Know disclosures are provided on forms drafted and supplied by KDHE, the legislature will make explicit what the trial record already shows. Those disclosures are the government's own speech, protected by the First Amendment and grounded in reliable scientific fact that this body is allowed to debate. The Constitution permits it, and these amendments ensure it will endure. For these reasons, we ask that the committee pass HB 2729 favorably, and I stand open for questions at the appropriate time. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Lucretia Nold. Welcome back to committee.
Thank you. Okay. Good morning again, Chair Kessler and committee members. I'm Lucretia Nold with the Kansas Catholic Conference representing the Catholic Bishops of Kansas, and I'm here today to provide our support for HB 2729, which would amend and strengthen the Women's Right to Know Act. Catholic social teaching holds that every person possesses inherent dignity. Catholic social teaching also tells us that the exercise of authentic freedom requires knowledge of the truth. And as Christians, we recognize that we are made for truth. We are all bound to seek the truth. Thus, seeking truth is a vital foundation to human dignity. In my last testimony, you heard me reference a recent trial, the Hodes and Nauser versus Kobach. At this same trial, we heard plaintiffs complain about the struggles of having to use an outdated method when providing women the Women's Right to Know consent form. Also mentioned were frustrations about lack of standardization when it came to that consent form. This amendment provided in the bill will address both of their concerns. The current paper-only format that the consent form is offered in is dated and honestly a bit archaic. Offering an electronic version of the form will allow the state to be in the 21st century. During a time when a woman is often overwhelmed with emotions, receiving critical health and other information in a timely manner is of utmost importance. It is very critical. It allows the woman to think through her decision and allows her space to seek counsel from a trusted family member or friend. It gives her a time to process what is happening before making a life-impacting decision. Addressing the concerns of not having a standardized consent form is a simple adjustment. This bill would require the Kansas Department of Health and Environment to provide the form. This eliminates any concerns or frustrations, as a standardized form from KDHE helps ensure proper and straightforward compliance. It also ensures that every woman receiving the information receives the same information. Again, in my previous testimony, I mentioned attending the trial where 3 women testified saying their abortions were under pressure, they did not receive adequate information, and later experienced profound grief and regret. Their testimony provides us with a powerful reminder that consent is not a bureaucratic formality, it is a safeguard for human dignity. In closing, I want to remind the committee that seeking truth is a vital foundation to human dignity, but in order to fully seek truth, one must have access to acquire such knowledge. HB 2729 will allow for an electronic version of the Women's Right to Know consent form, not just a paper version, while also eliminating any confusion, concern, or frustration about consistency and origin of the form by having a standardized form provided by KDHE. These changes will help women to acquire the knowledge and information necessary to seek truth so she can make a fully informed decision, helping to preserve her inherent and human dignity. The Kansas Catholic Conference stands in full support of HB 2729, and we ask the committee for your support as well. Thank you, and I will stand for questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you, Lucretia. Next up, Jean Godden. We do have your testimony, and we'll make sure the committee gets that out as soon as we find it. But we know we have it.
Thank you, Chair Kessler, members of the committee. Jean Godden with Kansans for Life. And once again, I appreciate the opportunity to testify before the committee and in support of House Bill 2729. And I think it's most critical to remember that what this does in requiring the Kansas Department of Health and Environment to create a standardized form is really not unusual, really not a burden for the KDHE. They already maintain the Women's Right to Know website online and also have available on there the Directory of Services and the handbook, which talks about fetal development and the risks, alternatives of abortions, as well as the assistance available to women who are pregnant. So it's not unusual, but what this will do is to provide the abortion industry with an easier way for them to be able to get this consent information to women. And as was already mentioned, could be electronically, could be a hard copy for those people who maybe don't have easy access to computers. Now, the abortionists who are suing the Women's Right to Know Act did spend a great deal of time complaining about how burdensome the form was. So they should welcome this amendment because it is requiring the KDHE to do all the work. And eliminates the need for them to come up with their own versions in ensuring that women are going to get uniform state-provided documents. So compliance with the law will just rest on the fact that either they gave the woman the form or they did not. And I think it's will especially ensure that women receive the same information in a consistent format, regardless of where they go to have their abortion and what the provider feels about the woman receiving that information. So women are going to know such things as that they can withdraw their consent, the father of the child has a responsibility to pay child support, and that assistance is available for prenatal care, childbirth, parenting, etc. So the amendments in the bill are critical to updating the Women's Right to Know Act. And Kansans for Life asked the committee to find HB 2729 favorable for passage. And I'll stand for questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you, Jean. Committee, we have a couple minutes for questions. I want to make sure I get Taylor in here. So, Representative Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So for any of the proponents, how long would it take to fill this form out?
Chair Kessler, members of the committee, I'm Jean Gowden, and Representative Sanders. You know, that's a good question. For most of the time that the Women's Right to Know has been in effect, the abortion providers would put the information on their website. So it really depends on how the KDHE develops the form, because we're not changing what is to be on the form. That information that has been in statute for many years is still going to be the same. So it just depends on how the KDHE puts together the form.
So do you have any sense, is this like a 5-minute deal? Is this a half hour? Do you have any sense of what it would be?
Honestly, I don't. The thing is, having it electronically or even in the hard copy, the woman should have as much time as she needs to be able to thoroughly go through this information.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Not seeing any more questions at the moment. Committee, that's all I had for the oral proponent side of this, so we're going to close that section. And we're going to open up the oral opponent side, and we have one today speaking, Taylor Morton. Taylor, welcome back to committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, members of the committee.
I'm sorry, sorry to interrupt you here. So yeah, so kind of the same thing, kind of give a couple of minutes so we can have a few minutes for questions and stuff too. So I'm not going to cut you off, but I just wanted to kind of, thank you.
My name is Taylor Morton, Planned Parenthood Great Plains Votes. I'm here today to voice opposition to House Bill 2729, which amends the Women's Right to Know Act, but does not fix the constitutional problems inherent to the law. The legislature passed and amended Women's Right to Know Act with abortion regulations that violated the will of Kansans less than 1 year after Kansans voted overwhelmingly to protect abortion rights in the state constitution. Among these regulations were arbitrary bureaucratic requirements that forced providers to give misinformation about abortion to patients. House Bill 2729 requires the KDHE provide the arbitrary form and allows electronic transmittal of said form. Not only do these arbitrary requirements delay access to time-sensitive care, but they also could create bureaucratic difficulties for KDHE as well as for abortion providers. And allowing the electronic transmittal of these forms raises concerns on top of the arbitrariness of the form itself. For instance, not everyone has access to email, and even if they do, there are privacy concerns, especially with sensitive materials. Whether on paper or electronically transmitted, state-mandated misinformation and arbitrary requirements undermine the provider-patient relationship. The ability of patients and providers to have open and truthful conversations about care is a cornerstone of informed consent, which is an important component of all medical care. Providers must be able to give accurate, necessary, and relevant information to assist patients in identifying the best course of action for their medical care. And providers should not have to provide state-mandated misinformation to patients. The restrictions left in place by House Bill 2729 are designed to shame and stigmatize people seeking abortion care as a means of making abortion less accessible. This is despite broad public support for abortion access in Kansas, as I already mentioned, and in August of 2022, Kansans voted to protect abortion access, and polling in the years since has only reinforced the fact that Kansans support abortion access. This bill goes against the will of the people by leaving in place unconstitutional requirements that impose arbitrary restrictions on abortion care. Kansans deserve to be heard when they repeatedly voice their support for abortion access. So I do urge the committee to oppose House Bill 2729. Thank you. I'll stand for questions.
Committee, do we have any questions for Taylor? Representative Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you give me an example or two of the quote state-mandated misinformation?
Absolutely. Under the Women's Right to Know Act, the law that this bill amends, providers have to provide medically unfounded information to patient linking risk of premature birth in future pregnancies and breast cancer with abortion, which is, again, medically unfounded, not based in truth. And providers are required to tell patients that abortion can be reversed, which is again, unscientific, medically inaccurate claim that can potentially be really dangerous for patients.
So you don't see any of those things as being debatable? These are just absolute falsehoods?
Yes, based on the I'm not a medical provider myself, but based on the medical research, yes.
And you're certainly aware that there are people who would disagree with that.
Sure, yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Committee, any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Taylor.
Thank you.
Committee, I would like to point out as well, we do have some written testimony here. And that was all the opponents that we had for this, so we're going to close that. I have no neutral. And just to touch base on Jean's testimony again, we will get that out to everybody today, so you'll have that. And with that, we're going to close the hearing on HB 2729. Now, I want to kind of just remind everybody, we do have quite a few bills we're going to tee up tomorrow to work. So we have all those wildlife and park bills that we're going to tee up, and we have several of the bills that we've heard this week we're going to tee up tomorrow. So come with your happy faces on. And with that, we're adjourned.